And so for the first time in 100 years, the industry had an incentive to actually make the incandescent light bulb more efficient, and they've done it. And we're also seeing LEDs and halogens and new products. That's the way regulation and the private sector can work together.
Stacey Lawson.
I want to.
How can you run for office when you haven't voted?
Please.
I have voted.
Please do not disturb from the audience. No.
So I want to add to Jared's point. I also want to say that for many years I was not sure that politics and politicians were actually solving these problems, and so the issue around my voting record I actually am very sensitive to, and I appreciate that that's an issue for some folks. And I think it was a mistake to not have voted as consistently as I should have. I didn't vote in primaries. And where we're fixing those mistakes are in the places like the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, where I co-founded a center to actually teach our young people how to address these issues. And I think regulation is one piece, having the right kinds of emission standards and clean water standards and species standards. But the other piece we need to think about is actually making fossil fuels less attractive. So we need to do things like ban projects like the the Keystone Pipeline, and we need to take away the tax breaks for oil industry that's actually driving a dirty fuel future for us. And we need to be making sure that we have the innovation that happens at places like the center at UC, where we're doing projects in solar and wind and electric vehicle, so that we can have the alternative renewable sources to move us forward.
John Llewellyn.
Yeah, the government regulations like the environmental protection, the environmental impact statements, we really need them. There are some regulations that I'm really working for, I've been working for all my life, and I'd like to see them happen. I'd like to see permanent protection from offshore oil drilling. This has been extended up to the Gulf of Farallones. It exists all the way down to Monterey. And now we need it north to the Oregon border and hopefully on up through Alaska. Permanent protection from offshore oil drilling. We need a National Energy Conversion Act, which will regulate our entire energy future so that we don't have an energy future based on terrifying fracking and tearing up the tar sands of Canada, and we have an energy future based on wind and solar. The regulations are the way that the people get together to solve our collective problems, and this is what we need.
Tiffany Renee.
Thank you. I believe that in order to really have good policy, you have to have good policy makers. As someone that's been involved in local policy and regional policy issues for many, many years, that's where I see the work is getting done. And it can be very dry and boring work. It's a lot of studying, it's a lot of evaluating the science and participating in the committee work that's being done. And so what we need are regulators and policymakers that are actually doing the work and representing us in DC. And I have a strong record of doing this, both prior to being on council and working on our development code to ensure that we would have heritage tree preservation, hillside protection, and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We were one of the first cities in the state where the governor said we had to, or the attorney general at the time said we had to deal with our greenhouse gas emissions before adopting our new general plan. I worked very hard on those kinds of issues, and it's something that I will continue to do in DC.
Daniel Roberts.
Yes, I'm the only candidate before you that has working experience and knowledge at the federal level. I'm on a national board, works with the Securities and Exchange Commission. I've been elected by some 900 firms in the western United States, 13 western states, to represent the interests of the smaller broker-dealers, of which I am one. For 25 years I've owned a small business. So with my hands-on experience with regulations, I know that Congress is enjoying right now a very low positive rating right now. It's really an F almost. But in terms of enacting regulations, the fact is that there's so many unintended consequences and adverse consequences, especially on the smaller firms. They're putting regulation and securities is putting the smaller firms out of business. The bigger firms can deal with it. They can shift costs and survive and any kind of regulation onslaught. Or they can get to the Congress directly. We know that. So there are no easy solutions. Thank you.
Norman Solomon.
Senator Barbara Boxer famously said that elections have consequences, and that certainly applies to the environment. And Stacy, since you brought it up, a little confused when you said a minute ago that you hadn't voted in primaries, but you also didn't vote in the general election, for instance, of November 2008 when Obama was elected. And so I'm just wondering if you could clarify that. That election had Prop 10 on it. T. Boone Pickens shelled out millions and millions to try to do a corporate rip-off natural gas measure. Us environmentalists, millions of us around the state voted against it. That's why we didn't get stuck with it today. Call me old-fashioned, but I believe that regulatory agencies, state, local, and federal, should regulate. And our regulatory agencies should not be regulated by the corporations that they're supposed to be regulating. We saw it with the Gulf of Mexico disaster with oil, where pretty soon you had BP and other companies telling the EPA, telling your Interior Department how they and what they were going to do or not do to clean up that disaster that they created through lax regulation in the first place. Finally, I think it's very important that we not take corporate PAC money or lobbyist money. Our campaign refuses to do either.
Susan Adams.
Thank you. Well, for those of you that remember when the Clean Water Act was passed, there were rivers aflame from toxic pollution. And the regulatory agencies were there to help us determine what are the best ways to clean up these rivers. And as a result of the regulatory agencies, we have cleaner water, cleaner air. Our endangered species are paid attention to. There is an important role for regulation. The challenge comes when the one-size-fits-all approach from multiple agencies that aren't coordinated delay really good programs that could help us improve our programs. Right now in this county, I'm dealing with the loss of the George Lucas program. He dedicated 5,000 acres of open space, was going to do a $50 million watershed restoration that was top of the line, platinum LEED certified program, and shrunk what he was entitled to. And the number of regulatory agencies that were treating him the same as they would a polluter made it very challenging, as well as the threat of litigation. So I think we do need to figure out how to coordinate so that the good guys are rewarded and the bad guys are taken care of.
Okay. I want somebody brought me up. Somebody in the audience brought me up a question, and I wanted to explain that the questions that I am reading were developed by the managers of it, and we may not have time because it takes us about 15 minutes to go through one question. The next one is, if elected, would you support policies to advance a transition to renewable energy? And we start with Brooke Clark.
Yes. I think one of the things I'd like to see happen is to cut the defense budget by 50% and shut down the foreign military bases. But the defense industry has some really bright people if they're directed to the right things, and that's one of the things that I think that they would be very good at. I'd like to just say a little bit about the economy. That socialism was tried about 100 years after the Wealth of Nations was written by Adam Smith. Capitalism came first. After about 100 years, Marx and Engels came up with socialism, and that ran for a while and it failed. Capitalism is now failing, if you haven't noticed. And the reason is that, what Adam Smith said is greed will work, and there's an invisible hand that's going to make it good for society. Well, there is no invisible hand. So the whole basis of this free market idea is false. If you watch the movie A Beautiful Mind, thank you.
Thank you. William Courtney.
Transition, I think we need a stronger term than that. Al Gore, if he had not been overrun by the 5-4 Supreme Court, could have been involved in a transition. An inconvenient truth has turned into an ugly fact that we need to address. And if we don't address it, then all the rest of our squabbling really comes to naught. So a transition, yes, rapid transition. And the problem is when you have an oil-run Congress, transitions are not possible. So we need term limits for everyone. We've got to get the corporate Congress people out of there. We got to bring in new people. In the absence of that, the seats are held, bought, sold, and now that the Supreme Court has given Citizens United the right to bring in outside oil to sustain that, progress will not be made. We'll talk about it, we'll play about it, it'll never be happen. We need an amendment to demand it, and obviously Congress is not going to be doing that, so that's going to be done by the people. There are a lot of changes that I think the people are going to have to be involved in because Congress is incapable of taking the lead on a lot of these issues because they're just bought and sold.
Larry Friesland.
I'm going to stand up. This is one of support renewables, sustainable. That's one of those duh questions. We could have started this in the 1960s. The question is, why haven't we? And you know, there's a saying that if a politician's lips are, how do you tell if a politician is lying? Their lips are moving. I want to challenge all of us. The mess we're in right now is because of the voters. We've enabled this. We can't blame the politicians for going back there and taking money and hanging on to power. I think a lot of people would like to do that. I pledge to go back there and not take money. And I think that one of the things that we really need to challenge is the two establishments guys, Solomon and Huffman. Ask them how they feel about the Democrats. I'm an independent. I'm leaning left. I registered as a Democrat for this. But they're not saying we're corrupt. They're not saying we're part of why we're building fracking and building Keystone. They're not saying that. They're not calling their own party out, which really makes me nervous. It makes me really nervous that they're liable to go back there and be like the guys we've had for the last 50 years who haven't done the job.
Michael Hallowell.
I have more renewable energy than anyone else up here. Back in 1970, the LA Times endorsed my candidacy against polluter Ralph Dills, primarily because of my strong environmental stand. In 2010, I was endorsed by the Marin Earthday and the Press Democrat also because of my opposition to offshore oil drilling. I believe renewable energy is the only way we can go that is not robbing from future generations. And the filthiest form of deficit spending there is nuclear power, because that toxic waste will be with us forever. And the heat keeps building up, and we have to find some place to keep it from leaking out, and we're going to goof, there are going to be accidents, and people die when radioactive material gets into their bodies. How widely dispersed it is, we don't know. We do know that it is going to happen. And therefore, I strongly support collecting solar power in space and bringing it back here to Earth. That's the ultimate answer. I do not support the Obama administration's phase out of the manned space program. I think they're short-term oriented, as you can see from their campaign finance contributions.
Jared Huffman.
I agree that it has to be both a transition to renewables, but also a simultaneous and concurrent transition off of fossil fuels. These things have to happen together and with greater urgency. And that includes, on the fossil fuel side, continuing to fight against expanded drilling in sensitive places like Anwar and our coast and the Keystone Project and others. On the renewable side, I'm going to again be a little bit different because I'm going to talk about what I'm already doing and what I have done. I mentioned the energy efficiency side and my lighting efficiency standards. Energy efficiency is a huge part of greening our energy portfolio. That lighting policy is going to reduce by half the energy we use from overhead lighting by the year 2020. Lighting is 25% of our electrical use. That's a big deal. I got to author the largest solar hot water program in the United States, AB 1470, 4 years ago. That is going to be the single most meaningful tool we have in the toolbox to reduce our reliance on natural gas. We've put in place a renewable portfolio standard, low carbon fuel standards. All of these and more are going to be needed. California's led. We need to take it now to the federal level.
Stacey Lawson.
So transitioning from fossil fuels to more sustainable, low-impact energy sources is not only a environmental imperative, it's also a national security imperative, and it's a economic imperative. While California has led the way in this, we still have only 318,000 clean jobs, or clean tech-related jobs in our state, and that's less than 2% of our workforce. So I believe that actually strong standards are a path to creating more jobs, not hurting them. That this is, necessity is the mother of invention. That if we move our economy in the direction of renewable and alternative energy sources, and we do it quickly, that we will actually be powering a new wave of innovation that is far beyond what we've seen with the internet, with the Industrial Revolution. This is the opportunity actually to not only put ourselves on a sustainable path forward, but actually be creating a massive number of jobs that can put our folks back to work and make sure that our working and middle class families are taken care of, and we reduce reduce the wealth and income gap in our country, which has gotten so terribly large.
John Llewellyn.
I was compelled to come and get in this race because I think that we need fundamental changes in this country. We need a National Peace Conversion Act to take our money and energy out of this ecocidal and suicidal, murderous, imperialistic military policy and put our energy into energy conversion. If I go there, you can count on me to write these big bills for these transitions. A National Energy Conversion Act that takes the energy that we have now from petroleum and moves us into the era of wind and solar and other renewable energy, and completely phases out the nuclear, which is really deadly to us. And I really think that this Fukushima needs an international approach to cap this Fukushima because it's still polluting us. And so we really have to move forward on that, and that's why I'm in this race.
Tiffany Renee.
Thank you. I just want to let the audience know that last fall I had consultants telling me I was going to need to spend 30 to 40 hours a week dialing for dollars, and I said no. And it's something that is so important. If we're going to go to DC, we need to be able to do the work of the people. And so by saying no, I have been able to continue my work both locally and will be able to not bring that baggage with me to DC. When I was about 9 years old, I started climbing windmills. We had a friend who was very interested in solar and wind energy. And around the same time, I had my 6th grade teacher was teaching us about the history of the Middle East and learning about Iraq and Iran and the importance of oil in our future. That was 30 years ago, and we're still where we were then, if not worse off. We've got to cut our dependence on foreign oil, and we've got to move to renewables. I've been working in Sonoma County to do this, to improve efficiency so that we can prepare for the renewable energy economy. Thank you.
Daniel Roberts.
Yes, thank you. My take on this, that a vote for Dan Roberts as a conservative is a vote to protect the taxpayer's pocketbook and the ratepayers. That would be my starting point. Secondly, I've always admired the American tribes, Indian tribes, for their policy of treading lightly on nature. So I'm very much in favor, I think as most of us are, alternative energy sources. But remember, if you move too quickly, if the science isn't in place and the costs are not competitive, then it's going to raise the cost of energy, and we are in a low-cost energy environment. That's how we've succeeded. So if you want to trade jobs for alternative energy, then be that. But I'd rather see jobs and economic recovery come our way. And no more Solyndras. The Energy Department has been pouring out your money for these failures, and there's more to come. Thank you.
Norman Solomon.
If we're going to have a green, sustainable future, then we have to have massive public investment in renewables. That means we got to cut military spending, tax Wall Street, and invest in solar, appropriately cited wind, and conservation. Conservation is the most important word in a sane energy policy for the next generations. And the reality is that as an independent progressive Democrat, I've got my feet on the ground and my eyes on our ideals, and we need both to be practical and to pursue what the next generations and the planet really need. And so when we hear the head of our own party talking about clean coal, how oxymoronic can you get? Letting Monsanto set GMO policy at USDA, all the subsidies and loan guarantees for nuclear power, Wall Street friendly cap and trade proposals. That's not the future we need as an independent progressive Democrat. I want to push for genuine renewable policies for the future.
Susan Adams.
The answer is yes, I will support the transition, but in fact, all government is local. Everything that's delivered to our communities happens at the local level. And as the person who was the deciding vote with my colleague, my late departed colleague, Supervisor Charles McGlashan, on the Marin Energy Authority, I took a lot of heat in the re-election, and PG&E launched a Monopoly Protection Act to try to prevent us from doing the kind of work that we need. But we won there. We need to get out of this war, $10 billion a month spending in the Middle East on a failed war effort that can be reinvested back into our local economy, the huge subsidies to the oil industry at a time when they're making more money than ever in their history during a deep recession. I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club. I'm very proud of that. Nurses still have an 85% approval rating. So I'm hoping that my Healthy Planet, Healthy Communities approach, my pragmatic more than dogmatic approach to problem solving, and my public record will demonstrate to you that I'm the one for the job.
Andy Caffrey.
The foundation of my campaign is conversion. In fact, I wrote the plan that John Lennon was asking for. Fight the climate crisis is threat number one. Rebuild America's infrastructure around bioregions and sustainability to meet all our needs as close to home as possible. Tax the rich. Medicare for all and expansion of the social safety net to get through this conversion. Retreat the U.S. empire. Use the military only to defend Americans and their property. End corporate personhood. Legalize marijuana. End the war on drugs. Prosecute the Bush administration for crimes against humanity, war crimes, torture, murder, and electoral reform. If you think any of these people are going to get something like this through, as typical Democrats or Republicans, you need a lot to learn. I'm a Green. My campaign says giving the Democrats a chance to vote Green. It's also giving Republicans a chance to vote Green. We have to put citizen leaders into Congress, not corporatists. My campaign's about inventing a method by using the internet and our grassroots connections to get to as many people as you can with $1 million worth of ads. And I have the first TV commercials. No jobs on a dead planet. It's about the climate crisis and conversion. Watch it online.
I wanted to ask, is there anyone here from the management of Earthday here? I'm asking because it's now after 4 o'clock, and I wonder how much time. 4:30? Okay, because we are actually halfway through now. That is, with 3 questions, and this is the same as 2 more questions and a closing statement. So, 4:40. Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot. Okay, then we're gonna start the next question, William Courtney, and it is: do you feel legislation should be enacted to reduce CO2 emissions? And if so, what type of legislation would you support?
This feels like old home week. We need an amendment to the Constitution. We need to wrest the authority from the oil bloc. Nothing short of that is going to do anything in the way of progress. We can talk, we can pretend. That hasn't worked for the last 10 to 14 years. Our CO2 emissions have gone up by 16%. We need an alternative. I've studied hydrokinetic energy. We have a very long coastline. Right now in Australia, biopower is capturing that energy. That energy is put there when the moon goes around the earth and creates tides. Zero CO2. So much electricity that we could heat, cool our houses. We could construct them out of aluminum and ceramic. The only thing standing in the way of that is the oil industry, and they run the executive branch, they run Congress, they run the whole world. We need to address these issues, and if you give me a couple of years, I'll do my best job. And if it's not done, I'll let someone else do it.
Larry Frisland.
You know, how come there aren't thousands of people here? You know, it's like we're just like the population is so bored with our politicians because I just want to scream the thing that, you know, farmers step in when they're around bulls. You know, I just want to scream it. Up here you have some people that have some really good ideas, and we have some politicians that have the establishment behind them and who are probably going to go to Washington and be part of that establishment. And that is the problem. That is the core issue, is the corruption that's going on, and we're like they're bought off. And my pledge to not accept money, I think, needs to get out there. Any of you know Guy Covener from the Press Democrat or Richard Halstead from the IJ? Go have a chat with them. When we sit around and talk to them off stage, it's like, yeah, politicians are corrupt, they're nuts, they're taking the planet down, the planet's overheating, blah, blah, blah. But somehow this message doesn't make the newspapers. I get a sentence in there that Larry talks about corruption. I think the headline should be, Fritzland attacks corruption, blah, blah, blah.
Michael Hallowell.
I'd like to take issue with Norm Solomon on GMOs. I was in favor of opposing the GMO ban in Sonoma County. We won that one, 58% to 42%. And as a result, you can do things like taking the vitamin A gene out of carrots and splicing it into rice. You get golden rice. You can use that in the third world to keep people from going blind. This is very important. Lynn Woolsey wanted $35 million for GMO research and couldn't come up with $1 million for mammograms for Marin General Hospital. This GMO ban situation is, she was worried about monarch butterflies. Now, I like to keep pesticides out of my food, and the way to do that is to make the corn so that it doesn't fit the caterpillar metabolism, so they don't eat it. Frankly, when I open up a corn on the cob and I find some insect larva has gotten there first, I think it's rather yucky. I think food for people is where I stand, and I think I'm pro-science and therefore pro-genetically modified organisms.
Okay, Jared Huffman.
Are you serious?
Please, we promise this, all the candidates they'll be treated fairly.
We have our job to do, though.
Meanwhile, back at the question, which was about greenhouse gas caps in federal legislation, the answer is yes. There should be federal legislation capping greenhouse gas emissions. Absolutely. If we're serious about this climate crisis, there better be. And it's too bad that this Congress, I'm sure, cannot find a way to do it, but we have an opportunity to win 25 seats in the House of Representatives and turn this thing around and get it done. Now, the good news here is that the Supreme Court can't undo it, because they already ruled a couple of years ago in Massachusetts versus EPA, and California was a co-litigant in that effort, Jerry Brown as Attorney General in that case, that the Clean Air Act allows us to regulate carbon as a pollutant so that we can address greenhouse gas emissions. So we can do this. We've got the legal authority, and we have the precedent right here in California, where we have the world's most ambitious, enforceable, meaningful greenhouse gas reduction law in AB 32. I'm pleased to have been a part of that, of rolling it out, helping keep it on track, and it's a success. It's driving investment, creating jobs, and reducing greenhouse gases.
Stacy Lawson.
So I echo the very strong yes. I think we need to hit the oil and gas companies where it hurts. I think we need to make them spend a portion of their profits on renewable and alternative energy sources that reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And we need to take away the tax incentives and other breaks that they've been gaining the advantage of for many decades now. We also need to make sure that we're improving or as aggressively advancing standards such as our CAFE standards, and that fleet manufacturers are reducing the emissions put out by both car and truck fleets, and we need to be investing in clean energy sources. So the more we invest in innovation and driving forward economic clean energy options like solar and wind, that will drive consumer demand and making sure that more and more of us are actually demanding those kinds of affordable clean energy sources in the marketplace. And I think what we haven't done so far, we've focused on the supply side, but we have not focused on the demand side. And that's where investments like in our smart energy grid, feed-in tariffs, and other incentives will allow us to drive that demand faster in the marketplace.
John Llewellyn.
Yes, we really need limitations on carbon emissions set by the government, mileage standards, requirements to companies like PG&E to convert to non-polluting energy sources. These are all regulations we need. I do not favor this cap and trade scam where people are trading carbon futures. I think that doesn't work. It's a way of dodging the problem and creating more toxic assets that are worthless. We really don't need that approach. We need to have a complete energy conversion plan, which includes strict limitations on carbon production and a lot of incentives to put in wind and solar, and to really move us into the new energy future that we and our children deserve.
Tiffany Renee.
Thank you. In Sonoma County and with the Association of Area Governments, I've been working to produce policies around local growth that are focused on infill development, reducing vehicle miles traveled, and more of the smart growth, transit-oriented design. One of the challenges that the country is facing is a huge percentage of our carbon emissions come from cars, and so it's reducing the car use that is really essential in future growth, and then addressing the issues of local and regional planning. We've got a real problem when the funding that we receive for affordable housing is tied to growth numbers, and it's sort of a backwards way of dealing with it. And what we need to do is start putting some teeth to the local environmental policies that are creating the congestion in the first place.
Daniel Roberts.
Thank you. I do recognize that additional CO2 emissions can to some degree raise global temperatures, but I don't think it's to the extent that we are driven off fossil fuels now. And I would favor private sectors, I favor private sector solutions to these issues rather than forcing a measure which could lead to a $10 a gallon gasoline. Is that what we really want here?
Yes.
Yeah, good. That's the path you're going to go, right. I don't think most people agree with you on that, but that's the way we're going. And plus, underlying the energy cost underlies most of our products, so it feeds through everything that we manufacture from distillates. So with that, I would say finally that I am independent enough. This is an important measure that I can reach across the aisle and form consensus. Thank you.
Norman Solomon.
I disagree with my Republican opponent here. I mean, good for you to reach across the aisle, but don't pull us in the right-wing direction that allows corporations to set energy policy, because we've seen where that leads. I believe in the truism that is profound that the cleanest kilowatt is the one that we don't use. That's where conservation is just so crucial. We haven't had federal policy really hammer it home with the public investment and resources that are essential with very tough and realistic fuel efficiency standards, insulation, retrofitting, rooftop solar, and so forth. Cap and dividend is a very intriguing and I think valuable approach. The Senators Cantwell-Collins bill, cap and dividend, where we have equitable distribution of tax revenues where carbon is taxed from the get-go. And let's get real, we've got to tax carbon. That's really essential, rather than cap and trade, which Wall Street, under the usual incarnations of those proposals, can game the system. If you like derivatives and credit default swaps, you'd love that kind of cap and trade.
Susan Adams.
So the answer is yes. We should not only be addressing our carbon emissions, but the other toxic emissions that are also causing us lung disease. And I want to just take a different tract here and say, but we have a global issue to deal with. We should start by signing up for the Kyoto Principles. We have not joined our other international communities in making a commitment to the climate change and greenhouse gas issues. And when we live on a little blue marble that's floating around the universe, and China is burning toxic dioxins and Fukushima is leaking nuclear, we're all affected by that. That air and those waters come to our shores. So we need to work better with our foreign neighbors. We also, this has implications for our trade policies and how we do imports and exports in this country. We have a gyre of plastic that's circulating in the Pacific Ocean that is causing some problems. And in Marin County, we've taken an approach locally to address those issues. It happens locally.
Susan.
Thank you.
Andy Caffrey.
I had the same professor Al Gore had, Roger Revelle, and he started measuring CO2 the year I was born, 1957, I'm 54. And CO2 then was 315 parts per million. That was only 35 parts per million over pre-industrial levels at 280. We're now 110 parts per million over pre-industrial. In fact, we've doubled the natural range. I've studied the history of ice ages, and we go through glacial and interglacial oscillations. 100,000 years we're in what we consider an ice age, and then 10,000 years like what we have right now, the interglacial. And the natural variability is from 170 parts per million to 280. That's 110 parts per million. We've now added another 110. This requires a national emergency. President Obama has to declare a national emergency, and we have to join an effort to educate everybody and make this conversion. If we don't do it in time, we're dead. The most important question you should be asking yourself is how much do we have to reduce our fossil fuel emissions and how much time do we have to do it? If you can't do that, then I would suggest to you that you're betraying your children and grandchildren the way the Vietnam generation was betrayed by their parents. They just let Nixon and LBJ send their boys off to die and to become killers, and the parents did no homework. They didn't read about Vietnam. They didn't go to peace rallies.
Brooke Clark.
Yes, but how do you get this accomplished? If you think back to 2008, Obama said things you wanted to hear very much like these guys are saying, and he got in office and then did a 180 turn on you. I got a webpage called End Two-Party Government, 2 being a digit, and I think this is an extremely important concept. The Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee are super-duper-duper PACs. So if someone says they're not going to take PAC money and then they're a Republican or a Democrat, they're already bought. Yeah, it's a disaster. It's that simple. And to fix this, we got to get some independent people in office. It doesn't take a majority of independent people. It just takes a handful. All we need to do is have enough to block silly bills and pass good ones. Right now you have party paralysis where they fight each other, nothing gets accomplished. So again, if someone's a Democrat or a Republican and you vote for them, you're insane, because insanity is doing something over and over again expecting a change.
Okay, this is the last question. Given the current climate in Congress, what can realistically be achieved on environmental issues? And Larry, you start first.
What can realistically be changed? Well, actually, nothing is going to be changed if we keep the same people back there that we have. 90% of us do not trust Washington. And I wrote a book called We Are the 99% and We're Running for Office, Washington's Worst Nightmare. The reality is that it's the establishment on both sides. I challenge Norman Solomon. He says on his website, no PAC money. The FEC shows he does. He says he won't accept corporate PAC money. That's like the Republicans saying they won't accept union PAC money. It's disingenuous. The reality is that he and Hoffman are establishment Democrats, and I would love to vote for them if they would just be honest and talk about the $28 billion that they, the Democrats, give to the oil industry and the other ways that they're part of the mess that we've been talking about that's in Washington. The reality is that the establishment Democrats and the Republicans are the same group of people, and that's why 90% of us don't trust them.
Michael Hallowell.
What can change Washington is electing a Peter Bear, Bill Falanti type conservationist Republican in the tradition of Theodore Roosevelt from a Democratic district, just like it was Democratic when these two other Republican predecessors I mentioned were able to win in this area. The environment is the important issue. I would have a mandate with a cross-party coalition when I come in there, and because of that I could work with people who are in districts more like mine so we can reach some common ground. What is essential is to try to have a little bit of marginal districts that come back and forth between the two parties, not have this election turn out to be another founding of a dynasty so we can have somebody in here for 20 years. I'm not going to be in there for 20 years. I'm going to be on the top of the target list should I win this time, and that's what we need is political accountability, and cross-party coalitions are a key to that.
Jared Huffman.
Well, let's be clear about the current Congress. You're not going to get a lot done for the environment in this Congress. That's just the reality. Right now it's going to be about playing defense. I know something about that because I was a senior attorney at NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, during the Bush years, and it was all about defense. And as a state legislator, I've had to play some defense at times, but I've also had a chance to play offense at times and pass some affirmatively good environmental policy. There's going to be a window of opportunity as Congress shifts, as this administration hopefully is reelected, and we will have an opportunity to move into offense. But right now, it's stopping things like the Republican House's attempt to eliminate the EPA, to eliminate the Clean Water Act, to pass terrible bills like H.R. 1837, which I've been fighting against for months, that would upend California water law and exempt Westlands and other Delta exporters from the Endangered Species Act. I have played defense and I have won. I have played offense and I have won. I'm ready to go to Congress, and whichever way is called for, I will be prepared, experienced, and effective for our environment.
Stacey Lawson.
With 9% approval ratings in Congress right now, I think we hear, not only on this panel, but up and down the district, how disenchanted people are with career politicians. That clearly those that are in Congress today aren't getting the job done, and our Sacramento and Washington elite are not solving the problems we need to save this planet. And so I think it's really, really important that we start to consider candidates who come from a cross-section of our society, who've actually been working in the trenches, not only creating jobs and building enduring institutions, educating our youth, doing clean energy work, and allowing them a voice in what is now a very dysfunctional Congress. And so that's what I hope to do. That's the kind of candidate I hope to be, someone who has a very broad record of service and has been fighting for these issues around the environment and clean energy, around solar and wind and new battery technologies, home retrofitting and electric vehicle. And those are the projects that I've been working on for over a decade now. And those are the kinds of things that I want you to consider as you consider your next congressperson. Let's get a new generation of leaders in Congress and make sure we're solving these problems.
John Llewellyn.
If you send me, John Llewellyn, to Congress, it will be a fundamental revolution in American politics. I'm an independent. I'm operating on about a $10,000 budget for this campaign. I'm determined to achieve fundamental reform. I work with the Occupy movement. I work with the environmental movement.